Like we couldn't get more stereotypical.
I mean, there's still time. Welcome to the first episode. This is the Fantasy Football Podcast, hosted by three generic white dudes, one with a basic ass avatar. We're going to jump into our Dynasty League, review each team, contender, pretender. Are they for real? Are they not? Or do they just suck at fantasy football? I'm Micah. I'll host this episode. I got Jason up here above me on the camera, and I have Jake below me on the camera.
What's going on?
Let's jump right into it. This is our league right here. It's called Trust the Process. We're a second-year league, 12-team, half PPR. Pretty standard outside of that, except for we run a bunch of flex spots. So let's get into it. Let's start with JCG 395's team.
Yeah, I think I could lead this off pretty strong. Definite strong roster here. Josh Allen, Christian McCaffrey leading things off. And then we have a nice slew of young running backs, Gibson and Swift. CEH traded one of my first round pick this year in the rookie draft for him. Keenan Allen going to be a staple for another year or two. And we got Deontay Johnson, Kittle, super strong tight end, and a pretty thick bench with a lot of strong to middle of the pack talent. Second place last year, looking to take the trophy this year.
Yeah, I'm in agreement here. This is it's a strong roster. It's set up for success. You can see obviously leveraged a first round draft pick to kind of give them an edge over this season. I think, Jake, I do think you have one of the strongest teams in the league. I don't think that's disputable at this point. But my concerns would be, first of all, the workload of DeAndre Swift. He's presumed to be a bell cow running back in an offense where he could potentially see 300 touches. That's dangerous. CEH still has a couple question marks for me personally. I traded him last year for context. I don't know if he's going to be the guy in Kansas City, but we'll see. I'm a little lower on him than most. And then Christian McCaffrey, obviously with coming off a knee injury, you never know.
Yeah,
But
super fair.
good team though. Good team. Really good team. Obviously returning CMC after last year where he was runner up. Yeah. Early title favorite.
Yeah, I would agree, guys. I think this is probably the favorite of the league right here. I'm going to ask this just for clarity's sake. Contender, pretender, rebuild, or do they just suck?
Contender.
Consensus contender.
Yeah. I think we're looking at the league favorite there this year. If JCG doesn't win it, it would be surprising, I think. Let's go to the next one. Making Moves team.
What are your initial thoughts on this one, Jason?
I don't understand. So this is Zach Makin's team. He, in every fantasy league I played with him, seems to not know what he's doing until he makes the playoffs and potentially makes a title run. It happens every season. And his team is good. What was his finish last year?
He won last year.
Exactly. My point exactly. So I mean it does on paper it looks okay. He obviously has Derrick Henry. Mike Evans, a reliable wide receiver 1 with Tyler Lockett, a good wide receiver 2. Obviously the question around Robert Woods, but who knows? Kelsey is just incredible value at the tight end slot. I don't think that's very insightful. It's pretty obvious. And then other than that, you go down to his bench and there's just nothing. There's not a lot of room for error on this team. There aren't a lot of breakout candidates. I don't see him repeating is I think the simplest way to phrase it.
Yeah, I agree with that. His team is I just don't see the future upside is really what it is. It was like he drafted like a redraft league year 1. So going into year 2, his team still looks pretty okay. But I mean, he didn't have a young quarterback on his team until this rookie draft. He had Tom Brady.
Did he draft Tom Brady in like the 3rd round?
Yeah. Oh yeah. He picked him up pretty early, trying to figure things out. But his team's like, it'll be decent. It'll be playoff team this year, but the upside later on is an issue for me there.
Contender, pretender.
I'll go. I'm gonna go contender this year, and then it's definitely not gonna continue on though.
I would agree. I think maybe he has it this year, but I think this team, without any major changes, gets bad quickly. And any sort of injuries this year to Kelsey, to Derrick Henry, he's looking, at a top 5 pick, I would think. Who do we got next? Next up, we have Big Meech, commissioner of the league. This owner is something.
The hostess with the mostest.
The
What do we
commissioner
got here?
Sharks
yeah,
draft
so
picks.
definitely starting off pretty strong with the Herbert. He's going to be a great staple quarterback going on. Your running backs are where the question marks really lie in this whole team. Miles Sanders, good young running back, just hasn't really had the breakout. Mixon, RB1, super underappreciated. But then you come back and you have these absolute slew of young wide receivers: Diggs, AJ Brown, T. Higgins, Claypool. I mean, you fleeced the league last year to get these guys, and you're going to be set up for a super great future. Kyle Pitts at tight end, as long as he plays out, I don't see him not. And your bench is pretty deep in terms of young and current talent. So super solid team.
I tend to agree with Jake. With the exception, I don't think your running backs are a weakness. I hate Joe Mixon, not because he's a bad running back, not because he's even a bad fantasy asset, but he's been somebody over the last 3 seasons that has been an absolute disaster on my team and an absolute success on any others. So I foresee that happening again this year. So I drafted him in our redraft league. And also, I mean, just the fact that Damian Harris and James Robinson are kind of, there and available. I see them getting more time in our second flex than Chase Claypool. I mean, James Robinson, there's no reason to believe he won't repeat what he did last year, to me. So I think people are low on him for no reason other than he was set to take a reduced role this season for obvious reasons. But now with Etienne out, he's the guy again. So I will say that this is a contender. Meech, as much as I hate giving you any sort of compliment, you've done a good job. You've done a good job in transactionally. You've been making a lot of moves, and they've been the right ones to this point. And I hope I hope you prove me wrong in saying that and you just fall apart. But yeah, I mean, I think you are the second to the throne right now in the league.
I wish I had the amount of confidence in my team that you do. Notable off-season moves: traded away Alvin Kamara, DK Metcalf, Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Last season traded off Adam Thielen. Yeah, we'll see if it pans out. Young squad. I feel like there's a lot of potential here, but some of these guys are going to have to live up to it, I think, if it turns into a true dynasty. Jake, I know Jason said you think he's a contender this year. Where are you at, Jake?
I mean, I'm going to throw him up in the contender role. Definitely, I think top 4. But yeah, you rolled some dice. You rolled some dice for some young talent. And if you don't win right away, you at least are good for the first handful of years in this dynasty. So
yeah, this should be a playoff team for a long time, but do they ever get over that hump to number 1? We'll see. Moving on. Next up, we have LOL GG's team.
And Zoom just fucked me there. Hang on. Are we allowed to swear on this podcast? We never established that.
Bit late now, eh?
Yep.
yeah, I say we let her fly. Just be tasteful.
I mean, what are they going to do? Demonetize us? So
Yeah.
make us nothing.
While he's getting it pulled up, I guess I can talk about the big players. I have it pulled up here. You'll see
There
him
you
in
go.
a
I
second.
apologize.
He's got Patty Mahomes. This is my stepfather's. Is this my stepfather's team or is this Stu? Whose team
This
is
is
Stu's? So he's got Patty Mahomes, Dalvin Cook. He's got a really good 1-2 punch there. I always tend to look at that too, to kind of start my team off with who do they got running the show. He's got some pretty good talent up top, but I think his bench is really thin in terms of actual talent. A lot of need to prove themselves, I guess, and a lot of injury prone, as you see with a PUP player, T.Y. Hilton on IR. But I like his team. McLaurin's going to be good for a while. Galladay, as long as he proves himself, will be good. He's got Waller the baller. Overall, really strong team. I still think it's more in the pretender category, just because he doesn't have that absolute stud or 1-2 punch up top.
Yeah, I'll jump in here quick. I think his starting lineup is probably as good as anyone's in the league for the most part. I mean, he has one flex with Allen Lazard that's a little weak. Outside of that, his starting lineup's as good as anyone's, but he has no one on the bench. And so once injuries start happening, bye weeks, and you have to pull 3-4 guys from your bench and now you're starting them, can you still win? I don't think he can. I think he's a move or two away probably from really contending here.
I don't think it's a good team.
Yeah. I mean, what's the biggest red flag for you then when you're like, obviously we can see a pile of trash on the screen, but what is like, why is it? What makes you like really turned off?
The receiving core and the fact that the Raiders backfield is a complete unknown at this point. Those two things to me just completely disqualify. You need good receivers to win in Dynasty. And Terry McLaurin, not a bad receiver, questionable wide receiver 1. Allen Robinson, maybe an okay wide receiver 2. A lot of unknowns in Chicago. Kenny Galladay, who we don't even know if he's going to have a stable quarterback situation this season. And the Giants don't have a terrible wide receiver room, so he will likely see reduced work from what he saw in Detroit. And then beyond that, obviously going down the bench, there's just not much. I can realistically see Logan Thomas getting flex 1 reps this season on this roster. Yeah.
Yeah, no, super. That's really fair. His team would need a lot of things to fall in the right way for his team to have any relevance with that running back room.
Yeah.
And then just a lot of dice rolls at wide receiver there.
Yeah, if Dalvin Cook gets injured here, who's he starting? Josh Jacobs in a timeshare, or you're starting, Rojo? I mean, you don't have another good option. You just have such a drastic fall off between his first best running back and his third that it's going to be brutal if something happens there. Contender, pretender, boys. What do we think?
Pretender.
Pretender. Yeah, pretty
unanimous there.
Yeah.
Let's move on. Ryan Bordeaux's team is next. This is a buddy of mine here. I grew up playing soccer against him. He's got a solid squad here.
He offers me 3 trades a week.
He's trying to flip for players. He's got some pretty good quarterbacks. Nobody super young. I mean, Baker, but he's got a really strong, it looks more of like a win now mode, even though he might not have the pieces to win now. If that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And I agree with that completely. I'm sorry, I'm texting to get concert tickets right now.
No, you're good. I like that he's got Kamara and Chubb. He's got Montgomery. He has good running backs. Kamara is the only real stud in that. I mean, Chubb's good, but I don't see him as a stud. And then his bench isn't very deep.
Ooh.
Yeah. I think his starting lineup's a little bit better than LOLGG's, and I think his bench is also a little bit better. I think he's probably the number 2 contender this year. But again, this is kind of an older team. He doesn't have a lot of youth. He doesn't have a ton of picks. He's going to fall off a cliff. Next season, this might be a bottom half of the league team with no moves.
It's a very geriatric roster, particularly with the wide receivers. And, you've heard my philosophy on dynasty success and the need to have good wide receivers that stay healthy. His current starting 3, and this will likely be a starting 3 moving into the season based on his bench, have all had injury concerns over the past 2 seasons. And, that's, the stars could align and he could have a big 3 that end up in the top 20 wide receivers and could be competing for a title. I just don't see that happening. But if everyone stays healthy, I do think this is arguably the best team in the league, right up there with Jake's. But there's a lot of big question marks in terms of injury history for me. But contender for me, though.
I too will say contender. I guess like the way I see this team is just a lot of players who have had a track record. And as soon as those wheels fall off, it's just if it all happens at once, he's done for.
Yeah. And it feels like we're on that home stretch.
Yep.
Moving on, we have 4th-string running backs team.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's see what yeah means.
Yeah, no, so his team may fall into the category of shit. But to be honest, he's like the only one I've seen that I've looked at a team so far and I'm like, this team is not very promising. He does not have a lot of really great looking names on the team, like Amari Cooper and Kyler Murray are like really his bright spots, in my opinion. And after that, there is not much to write home about.
Like Mark Andrews.
Calvin Ridley.
Yeah, true. I mean, Ridley's gonna be a stud. Mark Andrews, as long as he keeps scoring touchdowns, will be fine, but he's been hurt on and off too. So he's, another one just waiting to fall. Cooper's missed time as well. He just has a lot of people with some wear and tear on their body, and not a lot of people to back it up.
Yeah, there's not a lot of youth. That concerns that. I mean, that's my big concern in terms of any sort of playoff push potential is the question of health. I think this is a prime candidate for blowing it up and loading up on draft picks because there are some good pieces here.
Yeah.
Mitch, like you said, Calvin Ridley, a contender would definitely want him on their team. He's somebody that's instantly startable for anybody in this league. Amari Cooper, similar, and Mark Andrews is a top 5 tight end. So there is definitely the potential to accrue draft picks. I mean, if I was on this team, that'd be the way I'd want to go. Well, probably retaining Kyler Murray. But yeah, I mean, I just don't see the firepower here, especially in the running back room. There's just not much available, unfortunately.
Jason says to go into rebuild. Jake, what do you say?
I think rebuild. I think blow it up, get a lot of picks, some promising players, and try and turn and burn and get better in the next 2 years, 3 years.
Yeah, this screams middle of the pack to me as is.
Yep.
Best case scenario, you get the 6th spot and you sneak into playoffs. You probably aren't a top 3 pick. You're just in the middle of nothing forever.
Yeah, I don't see, when you look at this roster, I don't see a 3-game stretch where they produce to the level they need to.
Yeah.
Like it's because they're so hot and cold. It's just not going to be there.
Yeah.
Next up, we have Schneidy's team. New owner. He took this over, maybe a week ago. So we won't blame him for what is here. But let's get your thoughts on it. Jake, we'll start with you.
Yeah. He has some decent pieces, definitely. Russell Wilson will be good. He needs to start looking towards the future. I don't think he has a second running back on or quarterback on the roster. He's got Jonathan Taylor, which I think really is his like prized possession on this team. It's the only pick or only player that is super high up there on the dynasty rankings. Some good talent. Robbie Anderson sitting on his bench right now, I think could argue for a flex spot. Marvin Jones, DeAndre Hopkins, Julio, as long as he proves himself in Tennessee is back healthy, will be good. I think he's a couple years away, maybe not a full blow up, but he's got to start getting a bit younger, start looking for pieces. This might be a 5-6 seed, maybe sneak a win or 2 in the first round, second round, but it ain't going too far as a whole.
I don't think there's playoff potential here. I've been way harsher than you, Jake.
Yeah,
Everybody's gonna listen to this and just
think you're a real
stop
dick.
making bad trade offers to me. My concern is nothing. I mean, this team is confused to me. There's not a lot of timeline. There's not a lot of cohesion in player age or what they're bringing to the table. Again, going back to the wide receivers, we have DeAndre Hopkins, Marvin Jones, and Julio Jones. Three of the big four on this team are all, past, at the tail end of their primes, if not past it. And then Jonathan Taylor just coming into it. There's not, I see potential to make some trades. This team has all their draft picks, fortunately. There's going to be contenders that are going to be looking at guys like Julio and DeAndre Hopkins and maybe even Russell Wilson if the quarterback goes down. So there's, potential to get a first round pick, maybe out of desperation or a few seconds and, build on rookies. My big concern is the bench. There's just no depth. There's no development. Golden Tate isn't worth anything.
Three free agents.
Fourth free agents, but Murray only got picked back up. Jalen Richard isn't worth anything. Sony Michel's hardly. There's not a lot to work with. So even even if this was a full rebuild season, so I think this is a tanking team.
Yeah, I think he needs to do one of two things, and he's got a hard commit. He's either got to commit to selling some talent, some young talent and some assets for better talent and go for it soon, or blow it up soon and just start the rebuild, rip the Band-Aid off. But he's got a hard pivot one way or the other, or he'll just be destined for that 7 seed every year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you either have to trade Jonathan Taylor for a slew of veteran talent and you go for it, and it probably doesn't work out. Or I think you start trading Julio, DeAndre Hopkins, possibly even Russell Wilson, and you start that rebuild around Jonathan Taylor. But yeah, just hanging out here in limbo isn't going to do you any good.
Yeah, it needs to be active this season. No matter where he ends up, he needs to be active. He needs to be making trades. He needs to pay attention to the waiver wire. He needs to, he needs
have a good draft.
He's got to spend his money. He's got to spend it right. He's got to pull a good player. Yeah, this team needs some work, but
we need a pivot towards a direction, and it'll, obviously you can judge once he does that, because if he turns some of these, he does have some decent young pieces that you could really get some, you could argue Devonta Smith could be worth something to somebody who's rebuilding. You could, go through and find some of those, package them together and get some players and make that starting lineup a bit bulkier. But it's the committed thing. You got to do one or the other, or you're just sitting back end of the playoffs, out of the playoffs.
Yeah.
So pretender for me.
Pretender for me.
All right. Next up, we have thoughts and prayers. This is Jason's team.
Go ahead, Jason. Fill us in. What's the team?
On paper, this roster looks a little like it has a little bit to be desired, but there are at least three breakout. Well, no, there are several breakout candidates on this bench. Two of them have been dropped recently for reasons that nobody can actually explain. We'll go into the starters later, but this is really important. Number one, and most important, is Tony Jones. This is after the Latavius Murray news that we're recording, which means that Tony Jones is now one of the should be one of the most coveted handcuffs in Dynasty, at least for this coming season. Anything happens to Kamara, he is the heir apparent in New Orleans, and it looks like they're going to be doing a lot of check down work, doing a lot of taking advantage of their running back room. So
bailing out Winston.
Yep.
Bro, he's sending it. He doesn't check down. He just throws it 50 yards and prays.
And then Dwayne Eskridge, the wide receiver 3 in Seattle, is what he's looking like. Got him for a song in the draft. Really great move on my part. And then Kadarius Toney, a second round pick in the draft that was dropped unexpectedly a couple weeks ago and just second round in our draft. Yeah, he is a first round pick.
Round in the rookie draft. Yep.
But he got dropped, and I picked him up for free just today, actually. So, But yeah, going to the actual starters, obviously this team would need some luck from the lottery picks to be in any sort of contending mode. I think this is a squeak into the playoff candidate. I think, I obviously have my biased glass, my biased blinders on. I think Gus Edwards is undervalued right now. I think Chase Edmonds is undervalued. I don't think James Conner, I don't think it's going to be a 1A, 1B in Arizona. And then Michael Gallup, I think, is poised. I think he's poised above maybe any other wide receiver in the NFL to have a breakout season. So, there's potential here. It's not absolute that this is going to be a team that can even sniff the playoffs, let alone contend. But I think there's a chance. Not a good one, but a chance.
All right, Jake, bring us back.
Yeah. If things go right, I could see that. Your team is, I mean, you have talent. I just don't think it's ready to elevate into that full blown playoff contender yet. You have a nice stud Hawkinson. He's going to be good. I do think he'll be featured. Metcalf is going to be awesome. Tyler Boyd's super undervalued, and you didn't even really touch on him. I think that's important to talk about. He's super undervalued. But Saquon, he's got to prove that his knee's not a bum knee anymore.
Have you seen that man's calves and
those
thighs?
calves let that
He's
ACL
fine.
blow once? So like that shit happened once. It could happen again. He's got to prove he's still healthy. You fell into the Gus Edwards, super undervalued. He looks like he's fits right in there, but 4 weeks ago you wouldn't be saying that if Dobbins was still healthy. So I think it's one of those things where your team looks pretty good. You do need some pieces to fall right. Some of those like breakout candidates to break out, and you'll be getting there. But again, without taking some big swings with some trades, you're still looking at a playoff kind of pretender team, at least this year.
Yeah, a couple of bright spots, and then a couple of maybes. Jason, we know how you felt about your team. Jake said pretender. I will break the tie, and I will also say pretender.
Surprise, surprise.
Next up, we have Najee and the Jets.
Mr. Waiver Budget himself.
Oh, yes.
Spending it like he is at the VU.
Spending it like it resets every week.
This team is, I think, kind of on the come up. He spent a lot and he spent often. His team is full of young talent and talent that needs to have the right things happen. He's a few years away. Probably look at getting rid of some of his veterans or just full on going for those high draft picks for the next year or two, in my opinion.
I like this team. I think there's some dark horse potential here. I think Matthew Stafford is being underrated so far. He has every weapon he needs to be potentially a top 5 quarterback and potentially an MVP candidate. I think this is the first time in a very long time, probably since his 3rd season, that he's had an offense that with this amount of cohesiveness. On top of that, the rookies here, very strong, expected to be immediate contributors. And, there's some veteran presence. And I don't get why there's 4 quarterbacks on roster. That's okay though. But I do see this team potentially, especially looking at the schedule. This team could potentially reel off a 5-0 start. I think that's completely feasible, and I'm going to say that this is a contender.
Yeah, I don't think I can buy into it fully yet. There's just a lot of unproven. Like, don't get me wrong, the team looks really good, and in 2-3 years we're going to be talking about him at the top of the ladder as long as he makes the right picks in the next 2 years to replace the outgoing talent. The 4 quarterbacks is questionable, but to see who they are does make a lot of sense. Darnold, Burrow, and Tua. That he's got 3 of the best young quarterbacks to hold on to, so he's got a ton of asset there when he wants to really go for it. He has trade capital. And it's just a matter of them proving themselves. Jamar Chase, if he lives up to expectations, then definitely. Higbee's got to really show that he can be a reliable tight end. Sutton's poised for breakout, but coming off injury. So a lot of question marks, but a lot of great things coming from this team. I'm going to say pretender this year, contender, will be contender going forward for sure.
I like it. Next up, we have one of the most controversial owners in the league.
the Outlaws, baby.
No.
Bad to the bone.
Oh.
I guess I can just start going in on this team. This team will need to make a decision this year. He is
the decision's been made. The owner just has to come to agreement with the decision.
It's got to get blown up. There's too much veteran presence, and the veterans there will not turn you into a contender. It is a team that needs to just sell everything, fire sale this year, get draft capital, get young players, get that the first pick in the first round this next year, and really turn a corner towards the rebuild. He's got some nice young pieces, but they're not going to carry him anywhere this year.
So I was just talking about how I was very confused about having 4 quarterbacks on roster, and here we are with 5.
I believe he just cut quarterbacks this week as well.
Oh, even better. Yeah, this needs to be a blow up. I think he has not been willing to trade Tyreek Hill. I think that's step one. I think Tyreek Hill I think he's worth a first round draft pick to the right team. But yeah, it needs work.
Yeah. Tyreek Hill, I think, is worth even more than that. But I think the decision was made last season. He traded Justin Jefferson away, but kept Tyreek Hill. And I think that was the absolute wrong move. I think that he needs to hold a public auction for Tyreek Hill, sell him to the highest bidder, get young, sell anyone else that's worth anything, and stop trading away his picks.
Yeah, he's, like I said, he's got some young pieces that could really come into it. But if people don't start trying to get some young assets and give him some picks back, he's in the bottom of the barrel for years to come.
Yeah, I just want to show he's not in a terrible position for picks. He's going to have, I say that, but he's probably the prime candidate for the first overall this year, and he traded that to
Stu
for Rashad Higgins and Kendrick Bourne.
Like I said, controversial.
Yeah.
So not his best moment there, but he can turn it around, definitely. But it's got to go. Get rid of this.
Yeah, tanking
blow
team.
it up. All right,
blow it up.
Pretender.
Next up, we have Broken Steps team. This is Jake's stepdad.
Yeah, this is another interesting one. His team has some talent, some young talent and old talent, sitting with Lamar. He's got Zeke and Eckler, who I think are two studs, definitely two like top 8 running backs in the league. Young talent. Ayuk should break out this year. He was a stud at the end of last year. CeeDee Lamb, arguably going to be one of the best wide receivers in fantasy football. I think he just needs to start. He gave away a lot of young players that he needed to keep to get younger going forward. There's still some question marks here about his future. His starting lineup looks good, but there's really no depth behind it. Kind of like a few others in the league. So he's got to either get younger and start developing going forward in a couple of years, or really get a bench to help him make a playoff push.
Yeah, I feel bad for Joe. I always do. Like, it's not a bad team. I really think that this team has potential. I think Devontae Parker has some breakout potential this season, but he's going to have 6 season-ending injuries. It's just the universal truth that Broken Steps team faces every year, no matter the league, no matter the format. I think he has playoff potential. It may not be contender potential, but I do think that this is a playoff team. I don't know if it's the right year to blow it up. Maybe next year, just depending on what, especially what his running backs look like and if they stay healthy. But I'm going to say middle of the pack, leaning towards contender on this one.
I am not going to commit that hard to it. I will say, if you want to pull up his picks real quick, I was looking ahead at what he has. He owns all of his next year pick and an extra first and second rounder. So if he uses some of that and some of the young guys to, again, fill that bench out, that's really where it's at. You said he's going to come into injury, and he won't be a contender if he hits those injuries. He's got to have people to back him up. And if he uses some of that to get the bench, then sure. But until then, I'm going to just middle of the pack pretender.
He had 3rd overall this year, didn't he? Is that what?
Yeah.
He had traded it away, and it was
Right,
second overall.
Yeah, because you got Kyle Pitts out of it. That's right.
I think by week 5 or 6, he needs to figure out what he's doing with those running backs. He's got Eckler and Zeke. Are you going to realistically win a championship with them? Or if you're a few years away, I think you trade those guys, you get some prospects, you get some more picks, and you start that rebuild. I don't think you have to tear the whole house down here, but I would be looking, especially if they start hot, I would be selling Zeke and Eckler this year for as many valuable assets as I can get. It's not necessarily for one. I would try to multiply them into a couple pieces, but
yeah, I think this trio at the top has playoff potential.
Yeah.
But
yeah, if it starts bad, if he's losing close matchups, but his running backs are good, get rid of them.
Yeah.
Last up, we have Lonely Boys.
Joel's team. His team actually is pretty good. I was kind of shocked how it played out. There's still, I don't think he's ready to full on win it, but he's got some good pieces. Trevor Lawrence keeping him up at quarterback. I mean, I think he's a year away from really being a stud, but I think he'll prove himself to be okay this year, especially with what he has on the bench. Aaron Jones, absolute beast. He's got some young wide receivers that really need to prove themselves before he's ready to turn that corner. But the mix of young talent and actual like decent veterans he has right now is pretty strong. He's just, I don't know what he would need to really fix to get him up over that hump of to contender. It's probably 4 through 6 seed with this team.
I don't think he's looking at the playoffs. Joel's he's a very smart fantasy player, and he realized last season that it just wasn't going to work, and did a really good job of tanking. He beat me in the tank lottery, which was really frustrating. But I like how young his roster is, and what he's got going here. Outside of Aaron Jones is going to be a prime target for a contending team to try to secure things down. Kareem Hunt may become that if we see a repeat of last season where Aaron Chubb went down and Kareem Hunt turned into a league winner, or somebody that was there to push a team into the playoffs. In my other dynasty league, that's what happened, and I was over the moon with it. But he's got decent pieces, but it looks like a team that's still going to be a seller around the trade deadline. That could potentially reach 500 if they, if he doubles down and decides he wants to try to push for it this year. But I just don't think it's his year, and I think he would be better served by getting rid of Aaron Jones, who is likely in his last season with the Packers. Running backs, when they transition teams, generally don't produce in the same way. We've seen it in the past with Le'Veon Bell, with Kareem Hunt, etc. So I'm going to say pretender, but a good foundation for a rebuild and an additional first-round pick next season.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think his decision is going to be made depending on his belief in Michael Thomas. You put a healthy Michael Thomas into that starting lineup over what he's got. I mean, you think a little bit differently looking at it on paper. He had he turned the corner and gave up pretty quickly last year because he knew he just wasn't going to make it, and he still was winning some games. I think he's just, whatever that decision is for him is the way it's going to go. He can make a run for it if he believes in Michael Thomas and it plays out, but realistically, he is a year or two away from really being an elite contender.
Yeah, I just don't see the pieces here. He has a lot of people who are wide receiver twos on a team. at best case in fantasy land, they're finishing a wide receiver 2, a wide receiver 3. I think you need just some of those tier 1 players. And I think his only one is really Aaron Jones. Then after that, you just have a bunch of band members. You don't have a lead singer. So not
Yeah,
horrible.
that's fair.
I don't think you have to blow it up. I think you could go for it if you wanted. Just kind of middle of the pack for me again here. I don't know exactly what I would do with this team. I think I'd give it a couple games before I made a decision either way. But
Yeah, like I said, I think once he starts maybe hearing how Michael Thomas is doing, sell him high before he comes back, or try and put some pieces around him to make that push over the hump, but you're gonna give up a lot of future assets for that.
right. So that concludes our team review. We are filming this on Wednesday night. We have the first game tomorrow. We are going to try to come back next week. We will give some recap on the games. Any sort of ground-breaking moments that happened during the weekend, we'll make sure we cover. And yeah, not bad for our first one. I don't know what kind of editing this will get. Probably just for our league mates, but it's something.
Yeah, I'm excited. We'll get a little more structure, get some things figured out logistically, and I think we'll have a good recap for everybody who wants to tune in going forward.
Word.
So with that, thank you guys for watching. Jason, Jake, thank you guys for helping out with this and jumping in here. We will end on this note. Fuck you, Stu.